Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to CoachX Live with the Institute of Coaching. My name is Jeffrey Hull. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Coaching, and I am thrilled to have Garry Ridge with me here today to talk about his new book, which you can see. I could hold up my Kindle, but I think you can see the cover. Any dumbass can do it. But there's an important subtitle to that book, which is Learning Moments from an Everyday CEO of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Company. And there is a reason why I wanted to invite Garry to talk to us today, to join the Institute of Coaching, and hopefully a lot of coaches that will be showing up in my comment section any minute. Because it's not every day that we get to talk to someone who's actually worked with coaches over many years and also been responsible for growing, building, and supporting a successful company over a long period of time, and then took the extra step of stepping back and actually writing some of his wisdom, some of his nuggets from learning what it takes to be able to do that. So I am really excited. We usually talk to coaches who are doing work with leaders, and today we get the privilege of talking to a very, very successful leader. So Garry, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, g'day, Jeffrey. It's an absolute delight. Thank you for inviting me along. It's really good to be with you.
I'm trying to, the chats are not coming in yet. So maybe Austin, who's behind the scenes, will get the chats showing up so I can see where people are coming in. We usually have folks from all over the world. But for those that are not familiar with Garry, let me just give a quick background, and then we'll dive into the interview. So I'm sure many of you, if not most, have heard of a company called WD-40. It is a global enterprise that's been around for many, many, many years, responsible for probably one of the most successful products of all time, the lubricant that works on everything, I guess, the best way to say it. And Garry has been the company CEO, or was for many, many years, for 35 years. He's now the chairman. He can tell us what his current role is, but I think as part of the board, he still stays involved with the company. He recently received an honorary doctorate of humane letters from National University in recognition of his contributions to servant leadership and creating workplace cultures of belonging, purpose, and learning, which has really been, I think, a theme. You see it throughout his book and throughout his work as a CEO and a leader. He's also a teacher, an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego, where he teaches leadership development, talent management, and succession planning. And he has this wonderful new book out that he co-authored with Martha Finney, basically taking us through the story, I think is safe to say, of how he built this successful company, which continues to this day. So here we're seeing folks coming in. Garry, you can see we have folks coming in from all over. Hello from Atlanta, Johannesburg, I love it, South Africa, Houston, San Diego, hello from Boston. So welcome, everyone. If you have a question for Garry, try to put it in the chat. We'll try to get to some of the questions. Garry, let me start by stepping back and asking you to reflect a little on the journey. To get to the point where you can write a book like this, you've obviously been through many stages as a beginning leader, as a manager, as a coach, and then ultimately as the CEO of the company. So give us a little bit of a taste of how you would characterize the journey that you took.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, it's a never-ending journey. It's perpetual in nature. As you mentioned, I was with the company for 35 years, 25 years as CEO, and in my later years, I was chairman and CEO. I'm actually now chairman emeritus, which is a lovely title they gave me. I'm not on the board anymore. I truly believed that, when we went through succession, I had to let the new leader lead.
Yeah.
So Chairman Emeritus is a great title. I have no accountability, no responsibility, and I can go to any party I like. So it's the best job I've ever had in the company. I still connect with a few of the folks there, of course, and I still have a passion. Yeah, I started in Sydney, Australia. I'm an Aussie. I opened the WD-40 subsidiary there in 1987. In 1994, they invited me to move to the US to help take the blue and yellow can with the little red top to the world. Back then, the brand was primarily a US brand. It had sprinklings all around the world, but we knew there were lots of opportunities. And then in 1997, the then CEO retired, and I often say for some silly reason, the board of a US public company thought that this Aussie dumbass might be okay. And I got to lead the
I
company.
have a little bit more going on than that, but
yeah. And it was really because I had a passion for our global business. I've had the good fortune to work in over 70 countries around the world and learn from a lot of different cultures and people, which has been absolutely fantastic. When I got to lead the company, with the people in the organization, we knew how to establish the brand, but what was on my mind was, how do we build a culture that, given that the sun would never set on the company, that people could understand and know they belong, know the work that they do mattered, where they could make choices, where they had a base of learning, and where they would be coached on a daily basis. And I went back to school early on, did a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego. That's where I met my mentor and dear friend, Dr. Ken Blanchard. And I really learned a lot about servant leadership from Ken. I actually ended up being on the board of his company for 10 years in the later part of the time. And we really had that opportunity to build this wonderful culture at WD-40 Company that has a very high engagement. 93% of employees are engaged. 98% of people say they love to tell people they work at the company. And we don't have managers there. Every leader is called a coach, by the way. And 97% of our people said they respect their coach. And it's because the coach's role is to help them win. So we're very, very engaged in the process of coaching.
I love it. And even in that context, you called your book Any Dumbass Can Do It. And I got a comment from one of my colleagues yesterday when we were promoting this event, and he said, "Is that really true?" Basically, he said, "Is that a joke? Is that being snarky?" He said, "I think there's probably something a little bit more to being an effective leader than just anyone can do it." So I'm really curious, and I don't mean to be provocative, but I told him I would ask you, like, on the one hand, I think you're trying to send a signal that anyone can be a good leader, but is it really that easy? I guess I would ask. That's what comes.
It's simple. It's simple. It's not easy, and time is not your friend. Now, I called the book that because I believe that a lot of leaders are overwhelmed with the thought of building great cultures. But if you know the ingredients that you have to put in place, and that's what I talk about in the book,
Right.
In an organization, anyone can actually do it. But you've got to have the right ingredients. I tell a story about when I was in high school in Australia. My science teacher gave me a petri dish, and the science teacher said, what we're going to do is we're going to grow culture in this petri dish. So I could do that. But there are two things that are really important, Jeffrey. One is, what is the ingredients you need to put in the petri dish? Right. And then you, as the owner of the petri dish, are you going to feed the good ingredients, and are you going to be brave enough to treat the toxins? And that's where it all comes together. So, if you're going to build a great culture, the ingredients you need are simple. You have to have a people-first mindset. You have to be coaches, not managers. You have to have brave accountability and behavior. You have to have a clearly defined, authentic purpose. You have to have a hierarchical set of values. You have to have transparency and simplicity. You have to have learning moments, not failures. You have to have learning moments that reduce fear. You have to create belonging, acceptance, and connectedness. And you have to have care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. Those are the ingredients. And then you, as the coach and the leader, have to make sure that you continually feed those ingredients and you attack the toxins that try and attack those things in your organization. So this is a everyday event. And a lot of people say this is the soft stuff. Let me tell you, this is not soft. This
Right.
is the hard stuff.
Right. It's the core, and it's actually the muscles that need to be developed. I love this because, I mean, you're kind of answering the question that on the one hand, it is an available capability and capacity to anyone, which I think was the core of your message
Yes.
in the title. But that's a pretty long list of items that a leader needs to attend to. So I'm curious for you, thinking about your journey, share with us a couple of learning moments. Like there's one in your book when you were in China that I absolutely loved, when you were talking about the conference that you went to and they were giving away empty bags in the hall, down the hall, and you couldn't imagine why they were lining up to get their empty bags. I mean, I love that story. But I'm curious to have you share with us a few of those moments when this started to, because you didn't wake up one day at 25 or 30 or whenever it all began, your journey began as a leader, and have all this capability. So, when did these things start to evolve within you?
Well, it all started when I decided to go back to school.
Okay.
And in fact, in the first chapter of the book, I talk about the three things that kind of collided. I was on a Qantas 747 flying from Los Angeles to Sydney at 38,000 feet somewhere over the South Pacific Ocean at 2 a.m. in the morning. And as you do when you travel, you read things, right?
Right.
And I was reading some stuff and I read a quote that was attributed to the Dalai Lama. Our purpose in life is to make people happy. If you can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And I thought, wow, that's, that I like that. And it makes sense. And isn't that something that we should think about in business? Because not necessarily in WD-40, but I witnessed other leaders actually, not probably intentionally, but through their leadership behavior, hurting people. Then I read a quote from Aristotle who said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I went, oh, duh. Of course, if you really enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do it better. And then that's swelling in my head. And then I get back to San Diego and I read about a master's program at the University of San Diego. And there was an information session that was put together. And Ken Blanchard was giving a speech there. And Ken said, most leaders get people in the head. We got to start getting people in the heart, because it's, let's have hearts at work, not heads. And I said, wow. So here I am now. I am the CEO of a US public company, and I went back to school, and that's where it all started. And for the next 2 years, I learned the attributes of servant leadership, how to build, a culture, and I started to execute those at the company with the help of my team. And progressively, we then were able to fill the petri dish with the ingredients and train the leaders to make sure that they fed those ingredients and that they were brave enough to attack the toxins. Attacking the toxins is where it's hard, because most people protect their own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development, because it's hard to do. And all the coaches that are on with us now, and as you know, I coach 8 CEOs right now. It's hard for them, particularly if they don't have clarity around what they're holding each other accountable for. So accountability and clarity around accountability is really interesting. But in my early years at WD-40 Company, I was focused very much on results. I believe success came from meeting big goals. But one of my teammates, at one time visibly deflated me by saying, doesn't this program mean anything? And it was about understanding. And it was like, yeah, I'm really here to understand. So, there are a lot of times when it's really about reflection. I actually, have learned that I need to remind myself often I have a notebook and I have a little sticker on the front of the notebook, and it says, it's kind of like my self-coaching. Am I being the person I want to be right now?
Right now.
And who is that person? And I have a list of behaviors that I want, because as leaders, and coaches, we don't owe people our leftovers. We owe them our full self. And so often, we go from one meeting, one thing to another, and something's happened and it's kind of taken stuff off our plate, and we go to the next meeting, we take our leftover self to them. And that's not right. So it's very deliberate.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that runs as a thread throughout your book is servant leadership. And, it sounds like you started having that philosophy inculcated or, brought into your mindset early in your career through your work with Ken Blanchard. And I'd love to have you share some thoughts around humility, because this is something that we don't, I personally find that humility is not always an easy thing to coach. There needs to be an openness, a curiosity, and a mindset shift for many, especially CEOs, where there's a lot of power involved and control and an expectation that you have the answers and you have a vision. And so talk to me about you share a lot about your experience with this in the book and how it connects to culture. But how do you navigate that distinction between being humble and curious, but also being respected and confident and competent when necessary?
Yeah, I think it's a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. You have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. You have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. But it's probably appropriate for me to introduce you to this person and those that are on this. To have this conversation, and I've had it many times, I created this person, and this is Alec. He's in the book, or it could be Alice.
He's in the book.
The soul, and I call him the soul, or her, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. And this person has some behaviors, and the behaviors are their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. They're a micromanager. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they don't always keep their commitments. So, and I'm sure as coaches, we've all seen these behaviors in people we get to coach. One of the values of a coach, and I have had a coach for my whole career at WD-40 Company, is that, and through my coaching work now, I don't think a lot of leaders really understand or are aware of how their behaviors actually impact others. And I think one of the big aha moments and breakthrough moments in coaching is when we bring that awareness to their face. And in a lot of cases, they're surprised. Really? Is that what it is? And, if they're going to, and if they're going to be a servant leader, then we'll throw Alec away for a while. Then they're going to love and involve their people. And there's nothing, there's only a few things you have to think about to build a great culture. Do people know and feel like they belong in the organization? Do people know and feel like they matter and that their work is making a difference? Are they allowed through values to make choices? Is there a learning moment atmosphere so that fear is reduced and psychological safety is brought in? And are there managers, not managers, but coaches? So they are always in servant leadership mode. A great servant leader is expected to be competent. They're connected with emotional intelligence. They spend a lot of time in what I call the stinky locker room. They have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. They're champions of hope. They know micromanagement is absolutely not scalable. They do what they say they're going to do, and they treasure the gift of feedback. And one of the three most important words I think I ever learned was "I don't know," and getting comfortable with them. And honestly, Jeffrey, when I was in my role, I used to introduce myself on many occasions as, "G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right chairman and CEO of WD-40 Company, and I need all the help I can get." And it's amazing how much help you get when you...
Maybe more than you want.
Well, then you can choose. You have a choice.
So were you always like that? If you go back before the flight, was that the Garry
No,
Ridge who grew up humble and
no.
curious? No.
Some of it, but not one of the first things we did in the master's degree, the first week was a whole week of where you understood yourself. And as I was, in that role, if anybody knows the disc profile, I was a turbo D. Be brief, be bright, and be gone. Don't give me the labor pains, give me the babies. And and I didn't realize how that behavior was actually so negative, and I had to change my behavior. And I'll admit, I probably had all or some of those traits of Alec in some level of abundance, but until through coaching I was made aware of them, I wasn't aware of how badly that was impacting people.
And so now when you think about the CEOs that you're coaching, you said you're coaching 8 of them or something, and you need to have one of those learning moments, and they don't want to know, what is the technique you like to use to create the space for the possibility of getting through to the...
Well, I use, I'm a Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder center coach. My technique is really to put them through what I call a physical 360, where I use the work,
literal,
the work, yeah. The Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is a great book. And he has those 20 habits. And I do and I do the same thing in the course that I was teaching at USD. I have them read the book and I have them say, tell me what of these behaviors you believe that you could, benefit from having less of. And they tell me, and then I speak to, their stakeholders, 10 or 12 of their people, and I do a heat map. And I say, this is what you said. This is what they said. And then we pick, 3 to 5 of these to work on. And then I have them complete, a daily questions process. Like if they need to not to be a micromanager, it's, did I do my best today not to micromanage? And then every couple of weeks I have conversations with them and we go through that for a period of time. And then, so that's the awareness and the side of it. And then the next part of it, of course, is the desire to change. I don't do rehabilitation coaching. If the leader doesn't want to change or doesn't believe that they can improve their leadership style, I don't work with them. It's not what I do.
When you were doing that, when you were in the CEO role, did you run into, you hire the brightest, you hire the best, you hire the top, minds. You also probably ran into some big egos on your team.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, how did you get them to sort of down a few notches and maybe open up to the style that you're reflecting back to us right now?
We did a lot of work in our hiring process not to hire those type of people. Now, that didn't mean that a couple of times they didn't get under the fence, but if you were to go onto our careers page, the first thing that pops up is, these are our values and this is what we stand for. And if you can't align with these, don't call us. But I've had these repositioning conversations from time to time, and if in the end the person didn't appreciate the leadership style that we wanted to execute, they weren't happy, so they needed to be happy somewhere else. So yes, we did share people with competitors occasionally.
So that's the directive part, as needed, right?
Yes.
You are the CEO. You have to be able to make some of the tough decisions at times.
Well, a lot of people think this is soft stuff. This is not soft. It's really hard. That's why so many organizations don't do it. If you look at the latest Gallup results that came out in January, we should be ashamed.
Yes, I know the
what we're
engagement
creating.
is terrible. Yeah.
They're terrible. I have this, imagine a place where you go to work every day. You make a contribution to something bigger than yourself. You learn something new. You're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. Happy people create happy families. Happy families create happy communities. Happy communities create a happy world. We need a happy world. But 61% of people who go to work every day are disengaged. And, imagine what the conversation's like at the kitchen table of a night. Dad or mum goes home, I hate my job, I don't want blah, 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 blah. And the person sitting there says, well, why would I want to go to work if I'm going to come home and be, unhappy and cranky and dissatisfied like that? So we have a job to do. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. And that's why I'm going to ask you as we wrap up is, what advice can you give us coaches to do what we can to turn this score around and create leaders like you, and then environments, cultures that support what you're talking about?
What can coaches do? Keep doing the great work that you're doing. Identify Alec and Alice and just make them aware. And as I said, I think most leaders don't get up every day wanting to make people feel bad. They're just not aware. And that's where a coach comes in to play, in that, our role is to make people aware of their behavior in a caring and sharing way and help them change that behavior.
And how does that translate into culture? You spend a lot of time in the book talking about the culture, the values, the psychological safety. And, Amy Edmondson is a good friend. I know she endorsed your book, and I love her research that she's done in that space. And I'd love to have you just comment on what it's like for a CEO to try to create a psychologically safe environment for curiosity and learning, because not everything's going to work, right? You're going to have breakdown. You're going to have failures. You shared some of the stories, like the one that I mentioned in China, where no one came to your desk or whatever at the conference that you were doing. So what are some of the keys for you to share around building that kind of culture?
Well, the fish rots from the head. So it's up to the leader to set the example. And the first thing is to reduce the fear around failure. That's why we said we don't make mistakes, we have learning moments.
Right.
And the definition of a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. Then make sure that the organization has a clearly defined purpose. Why do we get up every day? And then, do you have a hierarchical set of values in the organization that are clearly defined, that empower people, protect people, and set them free? And those are basically the elements that you need to have in place to start to build the culture. But, a friend of mine is Charlie Maloof. He owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out in Charlotte, North Carolina. He has a beautiful saying. He says, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crock pot approach. And it's so true.
It can't be done in less than 1 minute at 800 watts, right? I love it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things that I love about your book is that you retained something that, to my mind, is the key to creating a context in which coaching can work, growth can work, learning can work. And that is curiosity instead of judgment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Be always asking why and how. And you've got to be curious. We're continual learners, as I think Michelangelo said, and caro imparo. I think that's it. Learning, we always are.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really wonderful that you took the time to put some of these thoughts on paper and to share for coaches, but for other leaders to not feel bad about themselves if they realize that they have some of that type A behavior. Because the paradox is that in our culture, a lot of that behavior is rewarded.
Yeah.
Right? Being type A, being directive, being very clear on what you want, being very efficient, getting results, pushing through. That is something that gets you an achievement, gets you an A in the culture. But it can translate into toxicity very, very easily. So I think it's really valuable to hear from someone who's actually was in the job. So I want to thank you for taking the time to
my pleasure.
talk about that.
Yeah,
Any last thoughts you want to share with us about how we can turn the world around?
Oh, I often end with a saying that I love: life's a gift, don't send it back unwrapped.
And I think it's safe to say that this book is a gift, and that you are fortunate to be we are fortunate to have a role model in you as someone who has kind of demonstrated that it is possible to be both humble, humane, and effective and successful as a leader. They are not mutually exclusive. We see too much, especially in the media, especially in our political realms, of where there's just no connection between those things. So, I really hope that the audience and the coaches will read your book, and I certainly found it valuable, and it gives me hope.
Thank you. We have a job to do. We've got to create workplaces where people go home happy, and business has the biggest opportunity to do that because we touch so many people every day.
I totally agree. And I'm really, really happy that you're doing your part to share with us the wisdom and the learnings on how to make it real in a real company. Yeah. So thank you, Gary.
Well,
go ahead.
Dumbassery is your superpower. And if the coaches want to measure their level of dumbassery, if they go to my website, there's a quick quiz they can take, and it'll give them a dumbassery score, and they'll get a playbook that'll give them some tips on how to do. So www.thelearningmoment.net and take the quiz.
Oh, great. So we can all be dumbasses together, right? And we
Absolutely.
we can change the world for the better.
Yeah, I am the Dean of Dumbassery.
Well, thank you for all you do, and I wish you all the best with the book, and I really appreciate your taking the time. And thank you all for joining us from around the world, and we will see you again very soon. Please consider looking on the website of instituteofcoaching.org to learn more about all our events, and hopefully we'll see you at one sometime very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.